What would you do if you saw a stranger bloody beaten and left for dead in a dark alley? Would you walk away or risk everything just to help? She was just 12, poor, invisible, living in a cramped apartment with her single mom, scraping by in a city that never looked her in the eye. But on that rainy night in Camden Heights, Delilah Leah Monroe didn't just witness something tragic. She stepped into it. She saved a man she thought was homeless. But he turned out to be one of the most powerful tech moguls in the country. What he whispered through his broken lips that night, it would change both of their lives forever. But what happens when you save someone from the gutter, only to discover they're the one who could save you back? And when power, greed, and betrayal strike back in the shadows, how far will a child go to protect the truth? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to follow this incredible true-to-life story of hope, injustice, and transformation. Let's begin. Camden Heights wasn't the kind of neighborhood you saw on postcards. Not in winter, especially. The wind had a way of curling around old tenement buildings and sneaking under your coat no matter how tightly you pulled it shut. And on that particular Thursday night, the cold felt like it had claws. 12-year-old Delilah Monroe, known to most as Leah, stood on the edge of the cracked sidewalk, her hands jammed deep into the sleeves of an oversized hoodie. It had once belonged to her older cousin. Now it belonged to her, frayed cuffs and all. In one hand, she clutched an old plastic flashlight, scratched, flickering, barely holding a charge. Her mother, Marlene Monroe, had been hesitant to let her go out. "You don't go wandering around Camden Heights after dark, baby," she'd warned, her voice rough from the flu and worry. But Leah had insisted. They'd eaten the last of the lentil soup that evening, just enough to keep the hunger quiet for a while. And Ms. Betty Clarkson, who ran the corner store 4 blocks away, had promised to save some unsold bread for them. If Leah didn't go tonight, the bread would be gone by morning. "It's okay, Mama," Leah had said, pressing the flashlight to her chest like a shield. "I'll be fast." Marlene had looked at her with tired eyes, the kind of look that came from counting every dollar twice and still coming up short. Finally, she'd kissed Leah's forehead and whispered, "Be careful, baby girl. That light better stay on." And nowhere she was. Out in it, alone, navigating cracked sidewalks and patches of ice, moving briskly from one flickering street lamp to the next like they were islands in a sea of shadows. Camden Heights had a rhythm after sunset, distant hip-hop beats spilling from apartment windows, muffled voices arguing through too thin walls, the occasional honk from a frustrated driver stuck behind someone double-parked. Leah walked quickly, head down, eyes alert. She passed Mr. Purnell locking up his barber shop, nodded at a group of teens smoking and laughing on a stoop, and felt oddly safe in the familiarity of it all. Until she heard it. A thud, then a muffled groan. Leah froze. The sound had come from the alley just ahead, tucked between an old laundromat and a boarded-up storefront. She turned her head slightly, pulse beginning to quicken. Another sound. A voice, angry, muffled, and then another thud. She should keep walking. She knew that. Mama had said it 100 times. Stick to the main roads. Don't go poking your nose into other people's trouble. But what if it wasn't other people's trouble? What if someone needed help and nobody else was coming? Her fingers tightened around the flashlight. The beam flickered but held. One breath in, one step forward. Leah approached the mouth of the alley like it was breathing. It exhaled cold darkness. Her heart pounded in her ears. And then she saw them. 2 figures. One curled on the ground, arms shielding his ribs, the other standing over him, fists clenched, shouting something incoherent. And then, another kick hard, sharp, brutal. Leah flinched. She could turn around, run, pretend she hadn't seen a thing, but she didn't. Instead, before she even realized her own voice, she shouted, "Hey, leave him alone!" The attacker paused, turned. In the dim light, she saw his face shadowed under a knit cap, scowling. He stepped toward her. "Get lost! Kid!" he barked. "Before you're next." Leah's knees shook. Her mouth was dry, but her hands moved on their own. She raised the flashlight, flicked it on, and shined it straight into his eyes. The man growled, shielding his face. "Back off," she screamed again. "Help somebody, help." From behind her, voices. The teens from the stoop were coming, shouting, footsteps slapping the pavement. The attacker cursed under his breath, then ran bolting deeper into the alley shadows until he disappeared entirely. Silence fell, except for Leah's breathing, ragged and shaky. She didn't wait. She ran toward the man on the ground. He was older, maybe in his 60s, his face pale, suit torn, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. His hand clutched his side. Sir Leah knelt down. "Can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered, pale blue, dazed. Then he nodded, barely. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice broken. "You saved my life." Leah's hands were trembling. She could still feel the echoes of the man's scream, the attacker's boots slamming into him. Now, in the shadow of that alley, everything felt still but dangerously fragile. The older man was curled halfway on his side, gasping for air. His lips were tinted bluish from cold. One of his arms was awkwardly pinned under him, the other wrapped around his ribs. His expensive overcoat was smeared with grime from the alley floor. "Sir," two called out. "Someone's coming." "I think," Leah stammered, unsure whether she was trying to reassure him or herself. His eyes fluttered open again. There was something behind them, not just pain, confusion, shock, fear that hadn't faded yet. I can't move," he whispered. "You don't have to." Leah lowered herself to the ground beside him, brushing away a stray bit of gravel near his face. "I'm staying right here." "Okay, behind her." The alley entrance buzzed with new voices, footsteps. Then a tall teen boy appeared, his chest heaving, phone clutched in one hand. "I called 911, he announced, eyes wide. "They're coming." A girl, with bright pink sneakers, rushed in next, dropping beside Leah with a panicked breath. "Is he? Oh, God. I think his ribs are hurt. And his head." Leah glanced down at the blood now staining her own hoodie sleeve. She didn't even realize when it had gotten there. She wasn't scared of the blood. She was scared of what it meant. "Hey," she said gently, squeezing the man's cold hand in both of hers. "You're gonna be okay. Help is almost here. I promise." The man didn't respond with words, but his fingers bruised, stiff-closed ever so slightly around hers. The ambulance arrived 4 minutes later, though it felt like a lifetime. Its siren howled against the narrow buildings, flashing blue and red against brick. 2 paramedics moved fast, professional. A police cruiser followed just behind. "Please step back," one of the medics said, already checking vitals. Leah rose to her feet, hesitating before letting go of the man's hand. Her chest ached, not from running, from worry. A police officer man with a thick coat and kind but focused eyes approached her slowly. "Did you see what happened?" he asked, voice calm. Leah swallowed hard. She wasn't used to talking to adults like this. 2 saw it. He was being kicked, In the ribs. There was just one guy. I think... What's your name, Delilah Monroe? She answered softly. The officer nodded and scribbled in a small notebook. All right, Delilah. I'm Officer Carter Hale. He kept his voice low, like he didn't want to scare her. You were very brave tonight. At that moment, one of the paramedics called out, We've got an ID. Everett Callahan. Age, 62. Officer Hale's head turned sharply. Wait, Everett Callahan. Leah blinked. The name sounded familiar. Who, she asked. The Everett Callahan, the officer muttered. Founder of Calitech, big real estate, medical research, and charity, big name around the city. Leah felt like the ground had tilted under her feet. That name had been on TV. She remembered her teacher mentioning him once during a school presentation, how he donated books to schools across the city. She never imagined she'd meet someone like that, let alone kneel beside him, trying to stop his bleeding. A gurney wheeled past. Mr. Callahan's face was pale, his eyes fluttering. Wait, Leah whispered and stepped forward. The medic paused just enough. Mr. Callahan turned his head weakly and saw her. His lips moved. She leaned in closer. You stayed, he rasped. You stayed with me. Leah nodded quickly, trying to hold back tears. I didn't want you to be alone. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his bruised mouth. Just before his eyes closed again. We're taking him to St. Augustine's, the medic said, hopping into the back of the ambulance. The doors slammed shut, and the vehicle peeled away, sirens slicing through the quiet once more. Leah stood frozen, the chill now sinking into her bones. Only then did she realize she had no gloves. Officer Hale laid a hand gently on her shoulder. We'll follow him. Come on. Let's call your mom and let her know you're safe. Leah's heart dropped. Her mother? She'd been gone too long. She's going to be so mad, Leah said, voice barely a whisper. Officer Hale opened the back door of the cruiser and motioned her in. She'll be worried, but she'll be proud too. As the car rolled through the streets of Camden Heights, Leah stared out the window. The lights blurred. Her reflection stared back, small and pale and scared. There were smudges of blood on her fingers. She didn't try to wipe them off. Not yet. She just pressed her forehead to the cold glass and whispered, I hope he's going to be okay. The waiting room at St. Augustine's Hospital smelled like antiseptic and something warm that had burned. A little too long in a vending machine. Leah sat hunched on a hard plastic bench, knees to her chest, hands fidgeting in the sleeves of her hoodie. A thin wool blanket someone had handed her earlier was wrapped around her shoulders, but it couldn't stop the trembling. Everything felt too bright, too loud, too real. Just hours ago, she'd been walking down the street hoping for leftover bread. Now she was covered in dried blood that wasn't hers, and the man she'd helped was in surgery or something close to it. Across the room, Detective Carter Hale spoke quietly into a phone. His brows were furrowed, jaw clenched with the kind of tension that only got carved from seeing too much too young. When he finally hung up, he approached her slowly, lowering himself to her eye level. They're working on him, he said gently. He's stable. You did good. Delilah. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for an hour straight. Her head dropped into her hands for a moment before she looked up again. I just hope he doesn't die, she whispered. From what I saw, he won't. You gave him a chance. Leah didn't know what to say. Her stomach knotted. She wanted to cry. but the tears were stuck somewhere behind her ribs. Then footsteps, quick, unsteady. She looked up. Marlene Monroe burst through the doors. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide with panic. Leah Mama Leah scrambled off the bench just in time to be wrapped in her mother's arms. Marlene sank to her knees, blanket and all, clutching her daughter like the world was ending. "I'm here. Baby, I'm here," she repeated in a choked voice. "You scared me half to death." "I'm sorry," Leah mumbled into her shoulder. "I didn't mean I was just trying to help." Marlene pulled back just enough to frame Leah's face with both hands. "You're not hurt. No, not me. Just him." Marlene looked at Detective Hale with 1,000 questions in her eyes, but he offered only a quiet nod. "She saved him," he said. She called out, got him help, kept him talking. The guy might owe her his life. Marlene turned her gaze back to Leah, stunned. "You did what?" Leah sniffled and looked down. "I just didn't want to walk away." Before the moment could settle, a nurse in Navy scrubs appeared. "He's awake," she said to the detective. "He asked to see the girl, if that's okay." Marlene blinked. "He wants to see Leah." Detective Hale shrugged with a tired smile. Apparently, she made quite an impression. Marlene hesitated, eyes flicking between Leah and the nurse. Then, quietly, she said, "Go ahead, sweetheart. I'll be right here." Leah followed the nurse down a quiet hallway. The floor squeaked under their shoes. At the end was a room with a cracked door, light spilling through in soft yellow slants. Inside, Everett Callahan lay propped up by pillows. His face was bruised, his temple bandaged, and his breathing still a little strained, but his eyes were clear. When he saw her, his lips curved gently. "Miss Monroe," he rasped, his voice still hoarse but kind. "Hi, Mr. Callahan," Leah whispered, lingering near the doorway. "Please come in. You saved me. You can certainly come closer." She took a few tentative steps, then another, until she stood beside his bed. "I'm glad you're awake," she said. He smiled, then winced. "So am I. Thanks to you." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that feels soft instead of awkward. Then Leah glanced down at something she'd been holding in her hand the whole time, a small, crumpled candy wrapper. She'd found it in her pocket earlier and folded it while she waited. Now it was a tiny heart. "I made this," she said, suddenly shy. "It's silly, but I wanted you to have it." She placed it on the bedside table. Everett looked at it for a long moment, then picked it up carefully, as if it were made of glass. "It's not silly," he said, voice catching. "It's perfect." Leah blinked fast and looked away. "I should let you rest." "Before you go," he said, "may I know your full name?" She straightened her back. "Delilah Monroe, but everyone calls me Leah, and that's my mom out there. Her name's Marlene." He nodded as if committing the names to memory. "Well, Miss Leah Monroe," he said, voice low and warm. "I won't forget you." She gave him a small wave, then turned and walked slowly back to the hallway, her heart full of things she didn't have words for yet. Leah sat beside her mother in the hospital's family lounge, legs curled under her as she sipped cocoa from a paper cup. The heater hissed quietly in the corner, trying its best to warm the sterile space. She held the cup with both hands, like it might stop the shaking that hadn't quite gone away. Marlene kept glancing at her daughter, as if she were still trying to believe that Leah was safe and real and there. "I can't believe you ran into danger like that," she whispered. Leah stared into the ripples of her drink. "I couldn't leave him. Mama, he was on the ground. No one else was there." There was no scolding in her mother's voice, only awe and fear. Marlene reached over and tucked a loose curl behind Leah's ear. You shouldn't have had to be that brave. Not at your age. Leah blinked slowly. Sometimes, someone just has to be. Before Marlene could reply, a nurse peeked through the door. Miss Monroe, she said gently, Mr. Callahan is asking for you again, if you're up for it. Leah looked to her mother for permission. Marlene hesitated, then nodded. You can go. Just don't stay too long. Leah followed the nurse once more. This time, she didn't feel so nervous. Still shaken, but not afraid. Inside the private recovery room, Everett Callahan was sitting a little straighter now. His color had returned, and the lines in his face looked less like pain, more like thought. He smiled when she entered. Back so soon, he said, lightly. I just came to see how you were feeling. Better, he said truthfully. Though I suspect the real damage is under the surface. Leah tilted her head. What do you mean? He looked toward the window, out into the night beyond the city. I've spent my life surrounded by people who manage things. Security, reputation, public image. But last night none of them were there. You were. He turned back to her. Just you. With a flashlight and more courage than I've seen in rooms full of generals, Leah flushed. I just couldn't walk away. Everett nodded slowly, eyes thoughtful. You shouldn't have had to. No child should ever carry that weight. But you did. And because of you, I'm here. That means something. He reached over to the bedside drawer and pulled out a folded note. I wrote this earlier today. I was going to have someone deliver it later. But he handed it to her directly. It's for your mother. Leah took it carefully, holding it like it might fall apart in her hands. Can I read it? It's yours to do what you wish with. She opened it slowly. Inside, a handwritten message. To Marlene Monroe and her remarkable daughter. What happened last night reminded me what humanity looks like at its best. Please accept this gift as a gesture of gratitude. It is not charity, it is recognition. Everett Callahan. Below the note was a check. Leah's eyes widened. She couldn't even count how many zeros that was. I don't understand, she said, looking up. This is too much. No, Everett said softly. Too much would be pretending like your kindness didn't matter. Too much would be letting this moment pass without meaning. This is just right. Leah sat down in the chair beside his bed. She looked at the check again, then carefully folded it back into the envelope. My mom's going to cry when she sees this. She deserves a moment of relief, Everett said. Then his voice dropped lower, more vulnerable. I was supposed to be someone who helped people. That's how I built my legacy, or so I thought. But it was always behind a wall of distance. Press releases, gala dinners, committee funds. He turned toward her fully now. But you helped me with your hands, your heart. No spotlight, no promise of reward. There was a pause, heavy, warm, honest. Leah looked at him and said quietly, Do you think, when people get too rich, they forget how to be scared? Everett blinked. It was the kind of question that could only come from someone who'd lived with fear so long. She recognized it as a houseguest. Maybe, he admitted. Or maybe we just get better at pretending we're not. They shared a silence again, but this time it was one of understanding. Then the nurse poked her head back in. Sorry to interrupt. Mr. Callahan, visiting hours are ending. Leah stood, brushing down her sleeves. Good night, she said. Good night, Leah. She turned to go, but before she left, Everett called softly. "One day, when you're older, I hope you'll tell people this story. Not because I'm someone important, but because you are." Leah didn't know what to say to that. So instead, she smiled and closed the door behind her. Saturday morning arrived with a cautious kind of quiet. Sunlight streamed through the narrow window of the Monroe apartment, slipping across peeling paint and settling on the tiny kitchen table, where Leah was straightening mismatched placemats. Her fingers fidgeted more than arranged. She'd already wiped the surface down 3 times. Now she was just trying to breathe normally. "Do you think he'll mind how small it is in here?" she asked. "Across the room." Marlene paused from fluffing the lopsided couch cushion. "He's coming to see you." "Baby, not the apartment." Leah nodded, but her eyes lingered on a crooked picture frame on the wall. She walked over and straightened it. "Again, he's like, important, Mama. Real important. What if I say something dumb?" Marlene turned and gave her daughter a look. Not stern, just grounded. "You didn't save him with fancy words. Leah, you saved him with heart. Just be you." Before Leah could respond, there was a knock at the door. Not loud, but firm, and right on time. She froze. Marlene quickly wiped her hands on a dish towel, gave one last glance around the room, then opened the door. And there stood Everett Callahan. He looked different in the daylight, still sharp in a tailored coat, but without the stiffness. His face was still bruised, but the swelling had gone down. He carried no entourage, no briefcase, just a calm presence and a small paper bag. "Good morning," he said. "Mr. Callahan," Marlene greeted, her voice unsure. "Everett, please," he said with a smile. "And thank you for letting me stop by." She stepped aside, and he entered, taking in the space quickly but gently. No judgment, just observation. Leah stepped forward, nervous but trying not to show it. I straightened the table. "Want some tea? I'd love some." He handed the paper bag to Marlene. "Some honey lemon scones from a bakery near the hospital. Thought we might share." Marlene blinked, touched. "That's very kind." They sat at the little table, knees bumping slightly under the edge. Leah poured hot water from the kettle and added a tea bag to Everett's cup, then her mother's, then her own. "This is all we have," she said shyly. Everett took a sip. "It's perfect." They talked in soft tones, about nothing and everything. Everett asked about school, and Leah told him how she liked reading, especially stories with maps and secret passageways. "I want to be a writer," she said quietly, "or maybe a teacher, or both." "That's a beautiful dream," Everett said, nodding, "and completely within reach." Marlene shared a little about her job at the diner, how she picked up extra seamstress work when she could, though her hands were often too tired to sew. The rhythm of survival wasn't dramatic, was just constant. Everett listened, not the way people in power usually listen, with a half smile and a clock in their eyes. He listened like he meant to remember every word. And then he stood, from inside his coat. He pulled a slender envelope and placed it gently on the table between them. "I know you've received the check I left," he said to Marlene. "But this is something else." She eyed it warily. "What is it?" "An invitation, not just to lunch next week, which I do hope you'll accept." He smiled at Leah, "but to be part of something longer term. I'd like to help support Leah's education. I'd like to be involved, if that's okay with you both." Marlene's hand hovered over the envelope, not touching it yet. "We're not looking for pity, sir." Everett's face softened. "I'm not offering any. I'm offering respect for the strength I've seen in both of you, and because I owe my life to your daughter." Leah shifted in her seat, unsure how to sit still with that kind of weight. "Why me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied. "I know your instinct was to protect someone you didn't know, in a city that teaches people to look away. That tells me everything I need." Silence followed, not awkward, but charged with feeling. Marlene finally opened the envelope. Inside, another handwritten note. "This world is full of noise and shadow. But you, Delilah, are light. I want to help that light grow." And below that, a scholarship certificate, prepaid for any school of her choice. Tutoring, books, clothes, whatever she'd need. Marlene's fingers shook. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Everett said, "by letting me into your home." As they wrapped up the visit, Everett stood to leave. Leah walked him to the door. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you." "Leah," he replied. He reached out and gave her a gentle pat on the head, a surprisingly fatherly gesture. Then, just before he stepped out onto the cracked front steps, something flickered across his expression. He looked across the street, a black car parked a little too long, its windows tinted. He made a mental note. "Everything okay?" Leah asked, catching his pause. He turned back and smiled. "Yes," he said, but in the pit of his stomach, something had shifted. Somewhere someone was watching. High above the city skyline, inside a glass-walled office that caught the late afternoon light just right. Celine Marrow clicked her pen with the kind of rhythm that sounded like teeth grinding in silence. Across from her, the conference table remained set for a meeting that had already ended. Her colleagues had left. Everett Callahan had not shown up. Again, and that didn't sit well. She turned slowly toward the window, looking down on the world like it was hers to command. On the surface, Celine was everything polished and poised. Vice president of Calitech, MBA from Princeton, pearl earrings, cold ambition wrapped in a designer suit. But beneath all of that was a woman who had built her career one chess move at a time, always calculating, always 3 steps ahead. Until now. Until her plan unraveled the moment Everett Callahan survived an attack that should have silenced him forever. Because of a child. She replayed it in her mind over and over. One neighborhood nobody cared about. One mugging staged to look like a random act of street violence. Simple, quiet, and out of the way. But now Everett was alive, talking about new initiatives, pulling money from the company's real estate arm and into community investments. It was a disaster. And it all came back to Delilah Monroe. Celine's manicured fingers drummed once against the desk, then stilled. She opened her laptop, scrolled through news alerts. Sure enough, the headlines had begun. City philanthropist Everett Callahan credits young girl with saving his life. Camden Heights hero. 12-year-old's bravery sparks hope. Her jaw tensed. This child, this nobody from a worn-down neighborhood, was disrupting decades of planning. She tapped the intercom button on her desk. "Get me Vince." "Muss." Across town, in a dimly lit garage tucked between an abandoned car wash and a laundromat that hadn't worked properly in years, Vince Roderick answered a burner phone. "Yeah, it's me." Celine's voice came sharp through the line. Vince stood straighter, wiping oil from his hands. "Didn't expect a call this soon." "We have a problem," she said. "The girl. She's gaining too much attention, and Callahan's turning sentimental." Vince gave a dry laugh. "He almost died. People get soft when they're near death." Celine ignored the remark. He's changing his will, moving assets, shifting power. And that's bad for you. It's bad for us, she corrected. Vince grunted. Your job isn't finished. Celine continued. I don't care what the papers say. He was supposed to disappear quietly. Now he's talking legacy and social reform. She paused. I want eyes on him. And the girl. Find out where he's placing her. If he's bringing her into his home. Vince hesitated. She's just a kid. Celine's voice dropped. Icy. She's not just anything. She's leverage. She's exposure. And she's in the way. Silence stretched. Understood Vince's jaw tightened. Yeah, I'll handle it. Back at the Monroe apartment, Leah sat on the windowsill, sketching a flower in the corner of her notebook. The petals curved outward like sunbursts. Everett had only left an hour ago, but already the apartment felt different. Lighter somehow, like someone had swept away the dust you don't even notice until it's gone. Marlene was folding laundry nearby, humming softly. A tune Leah recognized from her childhood, something warm and worn in like a favorite blanket. Do you think he meant it? Leah asked suddenly. Marlene looked up. Meant what? That we matter. Her mother paused, then walked over and sat beside her. You didn't need a millionaire to tell you that, baby. But yes, I think he meant every word. Leah nodded slowly. Still, part of her didn't know how to carry this feeling. Gratitude, guilt, excitement, fear. It swirled like paint in water pretty, but hard to name. And outside, across the street, inside a nondescript black sedan, a man with a slight limp watched the apartment window, taking notes, waiting for instruction. The night air carried a bitter chill. Somewhere beyond the rusted fire escape, a siren wailed faintly, fading as it twisted through the crooked streets of Camden Heights. Inside the Monroe apartment, it was mostly quiet. The radiator hissed gently. Marlene had fallen asleep on the couch, an open book resting on her chest. And Leah lay in bed, facing the wall, tracing the pattern in the peeling paint with her eyes. She couldn't sleep. Not because she wasn't tired. She was. Bone tired. But her mind kept turning like pages she couldn't stop flipping. She thought of Everett's visit, the way he'd smiled, not like someone important, but like someone real. She thought of the envelope, the check, the possibility. It didn't feel like her life. Then, a sound, scratch, soft, barely audible, but distinct. Leah's eyes widened. She sat up slowly. There it was again. Scratch, creak. It was coming from the living room. She slipped out of bed, bare feet barely making a sound as they crossed the worn linoleum floor. Mama, she whispered. No answer. She rounded the corner and froze. The window. It was open. Not wide. Just enough for someone to slip through. A shape loomed inside the frame. Tall. Dark. Moving like a shadow that didn't belong. Leah's breath caught. Mama, she cried. Louder now. Marlene stirred on the couch. Her eyes flew open. Who what? The figure turned sharply. In the moonlight, something glinted in his hand. Metal. A knife. Leah couldn't move. Her knees had locked. Marlene leapt from the couch, arm outstretched in front of Leah. Get out! She screamed. The man didn't speak, didn't threaten. He didn't have to. He just turned and disappeared back through the window, melting into the night like smoke. A moment later, the sound of boots thudding down the fire escape echoed into silence. Leah's chest heaved. Her mother grabbed her, holding her so tightly it almost hurt. Then, on the floor, something caught the light. Leah stepped away from her mother and bent down slowly. A knife, and beneath it, a folded piece of paper. The blade had pinned it to the floor. With trembling fingers, she opened it. One sentence, all capital letters. Keep your mouth shut. The apartment filled with the sound of a 911 dispatcher's calm voice, then sirens, then blue and red lights dancing against the windows. Detective Carter Hale arrived, fast hair tousled, tie loose, face grim. He didn't waste time. 2 officers swept the stairwell. Another dusted the window. Hale crouched beside Leah, who now sat wrapped in the same old wool blanket from the hospital. Her knuckles were white where they clutched the edges. "They didn't try to hurt you?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "They ran. When we saw them." Marlene stood nearby, arms crossed tightly. "This wasn't random," she said. "That man meant something." "I agree," Hale replied. He looked at the knife, now sealed in a clear evidence bag. They didn't come to rob. They came to warn. He met Leah's eyes. "They want you scared. Silent." "Well," Marlene said sharply, "it worked." Detective Hale looked away for a moment. Then footsteps again. This time familiar, heavy, intentional. Mion. Everett Callahan appeared in the doorway, worry etched across his face. His driver lingered just behind, watching the hallway like a hawk. Everett's eyes swept the room, landed on the broken window, the evidence bags, the officers, and then on Leah. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice almost breaking. Leah looked up, and the tears finally came. "I was so scared," she whispered. "They were in our home." Everett's jaw tightened. He stood and faced Marlene. "Pack a bag," he said. "You're both coming with me. Right now." Marlene hesitated, pride flickering behind her eyes. Then she looked at Leah, still trembling, still pale, and nodded. "Give us 10 minutes. "Oh." As Leah zipped her backpack, she looked around their apartment. The threadbare curtains, the dented heater, the calendar with half the dates circled in red for overdue bills. And she wondered, would she ever feel safe here again? She didn't think so. Half an hour later, Everett's car rolled through the tall iron gates of his estate. Warm light spilled from the windows. A security guard nodded as they passed. Mary, the housekeeper, met them at the door with open arms and tea already brewing. Within minutes, 2 guest rooms were prepped. Marlene tucked Leah into a bed so soft it felt like clouds. Still. Leah stared at the ceiling. "Mama," she whispered, voice cracking. "What if they come back?" Marlene brushed hair from her daughter's forehead. "They won't find us here. Everett will keep us safe. And the police are on it now. We're not alone anymore." Leah nodded. She didn't believe it completely, but she wanted to. And sometimes that was enough. The guest room at Everett Callahan's estate was bigger than Leah's entire apartment. A tall bookshelf stood beside a bay window. The bed was soft and deep, blanketed in a gentle cream quilt. And the air, it didn't smell like fried oil or old radiator dust. It smelled like lavender. Still, Leah barely slept, even after her mother's lullaby, even after Mary brought hot chocolate and whispered, "You're safe now." "Sweetheart," Leah's eyes stayed open, because safety was a new language, and she didn't trust it yet. Morning came with birdsong. Outside, The Callahan gardens bloomed with early autumn flowers mums. Goldenrod, the last of the summer roses. Inside, sunlight spilled across polished floors as the house slowly came to life. In the kitchen, Marlene sat at the table holding a warm mug in her hands, eyes distant, across from her. Everett leaned against the counter. He wasn't in a suit today, just slacks and a dark pullover. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. Marlene didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I've never had someone break into my home before. I've also never had someone show up at my door and take us in without asking for anything." Everett offered a faint smile. "Then we're both in unfamiliar territory." Marlene exhaled. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Callahan?" He folded his arms. "Because I owe your daughter more than I can explain. And because, when you've lived behind walls long enough, it's easy to forget what real courage looks like. Last night, I remembered..." Leah wandered in a few minutes later, dressed in fresh clothes Mary had laid out for her. The sweater was soft and blue, and still had the tag on it. "Hi," she mumbled. Everett smiled warmly. "Good morning. Leah? Sleep okay?" She shrugged. "I tried." Marlene stood to greet her, brushing her hand over Leah's back. "You hungry?" Baby Leah nodded. Mary returned with pancakes and sliced fruit, chatting with the ease of a grandmother who knew how to heal people with food. They ate together at the long kitchen table, 3 people from different worlds, sharing a quiet morning like they'd done it 100 times before. But beneath the calm was something else. Leah could feel it, even if no one said it aloud. There was a shadow still hanging in the corners, one that hadn't left with the man who fled through their window. Later that afternoon, Everett took Leah on a walk through the gardens. The stone path wound through rows of trimmed hedges and wildflowers. He walked slowly, careful of his healing ribs. Leah matched his pace without needing to be told. "These are peonies," he said, pointing, "and those are salvia. Hummingbirds love them." Leah studied them carefully. "Why do you grow so many flowers?" He glanced down at her. "Because when I was younger, there weren't many things I could control, but I could make things grow, and that gave me peace." Leah didn't speak for a moment, then said, "My mom says some things bloom even in broken places." Everett's smile deepened. "She's right." They reached a small stone bench beneath an arch of ivy. Leah sat first, pulling her knees up to her chest. "Are we really safe here?" Everett's gaze was steady. "Yes, even from people like them." His jaw tensed. He didn't lie. "There are people whose greed blinds them. But I've taken steps. Security. Legal help. And you're not alone anymore." Leah looked away, toward the trees lining the back of the property. "But what if it's because of me? What if I just made things worse?" Everett leaned forward slightly. "Leah, listen to me." She turned back. "You did something most adults wouldn't have done. You saved someone. You spoke up when you didn't have to. Whatever happens now, it's not because of you. It's because someone evil decided to silence that goodness. That's on them, not you." Leah's throat tightened. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to hear that. Everett reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. It was the foil candy heart she'd given him in the hospital. "I've kept this with me," he said, "but I think it should stay with you now, as a reminder." He pressed it into her palm. "That one small heart changed my life." Leah blinked fast. Her fingers closed around the crinkled shape, and for the first time in a while, she felt like she might cry without fear behind the tears. That evening, back inside, Detective Hale visited. He stepped into the study, pulling off his coat, his face more tense than usual. "We got prints from the knife," he told Everett and Marlene, and the note. The same partial match came up. Vince Roderick, background in enforcement, worked overseas, then disappeared off the map. "Is he connected to anyone?" Everett asked. Hale hesitated, then nodded. "Possibly. Someone inside your own company. Someone close." Everett's stomach turned. "Celine," he said quietly. Marlene gasped. "That woman from the news. She's been with me for a decade. Helped me grow the company. Protected my image." He trailed off, and now Hale asked. Everett's voice dropped. "She's trying to destroy what we built. Starting with me, and anyone close to me." He looked over at Leah. His voice softened, but his eyes sharpened. "She won't succeed." The late afternoon sun slanted across the marble floor of the Callahan estate, casting long golden shadows as Leah curled up on the couch in the library. A worn copy of A Wrinkle in Time rested on her knees, but her eyes weren't moving across the page. Her mind wasn't on time travel or galaxies. It was on the window, still locked, still sealed, still a source of unease. She had checked it 3 times since breakfast. Across the room, Everett sat with his laptop, typing slowly with one hand. His bruises had faded, but the pain still lingered behind his eyes. And then Leah's phone buzzed. Not the house phone, not Everett's line. Her own cell. The one Detective Hale had given her yesterday, just in case. She glanced at it. The number was local, unrecognized. No name, no contact photo. "Hello," she said, unsure. There was a brief silence. Then a woman's voice answered, warm and familiar. "Hey, baby girl." Leah's chest seized. Her breath caught. "Ms. Betty." The voice on the other end belonged to Miss Betty Clarkson, the woman who ran the corner shop near their old apartment. She'd been like a second grandma for years, slipping Leah an extra peppermint, tucking safety pins in her backpack for emergencies. "Ms. Betty, where are you? We haven't seen. Are you okay?" The voice on the line paused. Shaky. "Sweetheart, listen to me." "Nah. Need your help. Something's happened." Leah stood up fast, the book sliding off her lap. "Where are you? What's wrong?" "I'm just a few blocks from the hospital," Betty said quickly. "A man came to the shop. He asked questions about you. Then he threatened me, told me to call you and bring you somewhere." Leah's blood ran cold. "Wait, what, he's with you?" "No," Betty whispered. "He left. But he said if I didn't call, he'd come back. Please, Leah, I don't know what else to do." "Where are you?" "I'm at the old laundromat near Camden Street. I'm scared." Leah hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the phone. "I'll come," she said softly. "Just stay there. I'm coming." Everett looked up as Leah slipped on her sneakers. "Going somewhere." She tried to sound casual. "Just getting some air. Around the back garden." Everett narrowed his eyes slightly. "Take your phone with you, and stay inside the gates." She nodded quickly and stepped out the side door. But she didn't go to the garden. She went to the driveway and climbed into one of the black sedans Mary sometimes used to run errands. The keys were still in the ignition. Her heart was pounding. But she told herself, it's Ms. Betty. It's someone she trusts. It's someone who helped raise her. Surely that wasn't a trick. Meanwhile, inside the house, Everett stood up. Something about the girl's voice. Too tight. Too quick. He walked toward the garden. "Leah," he called. Silence. The garden path was empty. Then Mary ran in from the side hallway. "Cerrone of the sedans is gone." Everett's heart sank. He didn't shout. He simply reached for his phone. "Get Detective Hale," he said. "Now." The laundromat on Camden Street hadn't worked in years. Its windows were fogged with grime, and the old neon sign flickered even though the power had been cut long ago. Leah pulled up and climbed out slowly, clutching her phone. "Ms. Betty," she called. No answer. "Ms. Betty." She pushed open the rusted door and stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and mold. A row of broken washers stood like ghosts in the half-light. Then footsteps behind her. She spun around. But it wasn't Ms. Betty. It was Vince Roderick, tall, cold, smiling faintly in the dark. "Hello again," he said. Leah took one step back, then another. "Where is she?" "She's fine," he said. "She's not here." "You lied." "I redirected," he said, shrugging. "It got you here, didn't it?" Leah's throat burned. "What do you want?" Vince stepped closer. "You've been making waves. Little girl. Hero of Camden Heights. Darling of the press. Protector of a very rich man." Leah's hands curled into fists. "I didn't ask for attention." "No," Vince said, his tone darkening. "But you earned it. And now, people are paying attention. People who don't want Everett Callahan alive, or generous, or changing things. You hurt him once already," Leah whispered. "You won't again." "Funny thing about people like Everett," Vince said, circling her. "They don't die easily, but they do. Lose the people they care about." The door slammed shut behind her. Locked. Leah backed toward the row of washers. Heart hammering. "You're not going to hurt me," she said. But her voice cracked. Vince didn't smile this time. He simply stepped forward, and then a loud crash. The back door exploded inward. Detective Hale stormed in, gun drawn. Behind him, Everett. "Don't move," Hale barked. Vince turned, startled but not afraid. He held up both hands. "Relax. I was just talking." Hale lunged, forcing him to the ground. Everett rushed to Leah's side, grabbing her into his arms. "Are you okay?" Leah nodded, shaking violently. "He tricked me. He said it was Ms. Betty, I know," Everett said, voice hoarse. "You're safe now. Outside." As officers led Vince to a squad car, Leah looked back one last time, and for the first time since the alley, she didn't feel powerless. She felt angry, and anger, she realized, could be powerful too. The elevator ride to the 45th floor of Calitech Tower was quiet, sterile, the kind of quiet that came right before a storm. Everett Callahan stood with both hands in the pockets of his tailored coat, his posture straighter than usual, but his face unreadable. Detective Hale was beside him, in plain clothes today, but his badge rested heavy in his pocket, and his hand didn't stray far from it. When the elevator dinged open, the sleek glass hallway was waiting. So was Celine Marrow. She stood at the far end, flanked by two assistants, her sharp heels echoing against the marble floors. Her face lit up with an easy, practiced smile. Everett. What a surprise. Everett didn't return the greeting. "Celine." He nodded toward the assistants. "Give us the room." She raised an eyebrow but waved them off with a flick of her manicured fingers. "You look tired," she said once the doors closed. "You should take more time to rest. Let others carry the load." "Is that what you were hoping for?" Everett asked. "That I'd stay out of the way?" Permanently, Celine didn't flinch. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," Everett said, stepping forward. I'm stating. You hired Vince Roderick. You fed him my movements. You orchestrated the alley ambush and the break-in at Leah's home. And yesterday he lured her to Camden Street. Celine's eyes narrowed. I think you're under an immense amount of stress. Everett. Detective Hale stepped beside him. We have phone records. Miss Marrow. A burner registered to a shell company. Transfers made from a Calitech discretionary fund you had sole access to. Vince didn't operate alone. Celine's smile faded, but her voice remained cool. And what's your theory, detective? That I hired a man to take down a child for? What a promotion for control, Everett said. For the empire you think I'm wasting. For the legacy you were trying to shape in your image. Celine turned away briefly, walking to the window that overlooked downtown. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. No, Everett, I wasn't trying to shape your legacy. I was trying to preserve it. You built this company on tenacity, efficiency, and profits. Then you get mugged by some nobody in an alley, and suddenly it's all about neighborhoods and charity cases. She turned to face him. You were going soft. You were dismantling what took us decades to build, losing your edge. Everett's eyes darkened. And what's wrong with going soft? What's wrong with choosing humanity over margins? Celine stepped forward, her voice rising. Because it's not your company anymore, Everett. It belongs to shareholders, to structure, to people who don't care about some poor kid from Camden Heights. He stared at her for a long, heavy moment, and then said quietly, Well, I care. And that girl from Camden Heights, she has more integrity in one finger than you've shown in your entire career. Celine scoffed. Spare me the savior complex. I'm not trying to save her, Everett replied. She saved me. Detective Hale stepped in. You'll be subpoenaed. Miss Marrow, we're opening a formal investigation. You may want to retain counsel. Celine's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. As they turned to leave, Everett paused at the doorway. Do you know what Leah gave me in the hospital? He asked over his shoulder. Celine didn't answer. A piece of candy shaped like a heart. No money, no camera crews. Just a symbol that someone still believed in kindness. He looked back at her one last time. You traded yours for power. I hope it was worth it. Outside the building, the wind had picked up. Leaves swirled around Everett's shoes as he stepped into the waiting car. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he looked over at Hale. Make sure there's extra security at the estate. I don't want Leah or Marlene feeling one more second of fear. Hale nodded. Already done. Everett stared out the window as the city moved around them. He wasn't just a man with money anymore. He wasn't just a company figurehead. He was the line between one child's fragile safety and the machine that had nearly crushed her. And this time, he wasn't backing down. Back at the estate, Leah stood by the piano in the hallway. She wasn't playing, just resting her fingers on the ivory keys. She'd felt different since the incident. Not broken, but older and angry. Would you ever fight back? She asked quietly as Everett walked in. He raised a brow. What do you mean? If someone tries to hurt you again, or me, would you still try to be kind? Everett crossed the room, leaning against the wall beside her. I think there's strength in kindness. But when people mistake it for weakness, sometimes you show them they were wrong. Leah nodded slowly. I want to learn how to be strong like that. You already are, he said. You just don't see it yet. She looked down at the keys, pressed one softly. A single note rang out clear and steady. The autumn light outside the Callahan estate grew softer by the day, as if even the sun knew something delicate was taking shape behind its windows. Inside the quiet study, Everett Callahan stood by the fireplace, a manila envelope in his hands. He hadn't opened it yet. He just held it, feeling the weight of its contents, not physical, but moral. Across the room, Marlene Monroe paced slowly, her arms crossed, brows furrowed in quiet confusion. "You said you wanted to speak with me privately," she said, "but you've just been standing there for 10 minutes. Everett." He gave a small, strained smile. "I've faced investors with billion-dollar expectations and hostile takeovers. And yet this is the hardest thing I've done." Marlene tilted her head slightly. Why he looked up at her. "Because this involves your daughter, and choices that don't just change lives, they shape them." When he finally opened the envelope, he laid 2 documents on the desk. The first was a scholarship agreement full tuition to one of the top preparatory academies in the state. A boarding optional, no expiration, all costs covered. The second was harder. Marlene's eyes scanned it slowly. Her breath caught halfway down the page. "Guardianship," she whispered. Everett nodded. "Contingency guardianship. Only if something happens to you." Marlene stared at the lines, then at him. "I'm not dying. I know. I'm not giving up my daughter. I would never ask that." He stepped around the desk, his voice lower now, gentler. "I'm not trying to take Leah from you, but we both know she's not safe not in Camden Heights. Not yet. And the people watching her, they may not be done. She's not a pawn in your legacy. Everett." He shook his head. "She's the opposite of a pawn. She's the only person I've met in years who reminded me why I started all of this." Marlene folded her arms again. "But it wasn't defiance. It was protection. Fear. Love. I've worked so hard to raise her right, to keep her heart intact." "You did," he said firmly, "and I want to make sure the world doesn't tear it apart." Outside in the garden, Leah watched a butterfly dance across the last of the daisies. Her sketchpad sat in her lap, half finished. She'd stopped drawing after the break-in, stopped trusting quiet things. Now she was trying again. Tentatively. "Hey," Everett said, walking over slowly. She looked up. "You talked to Mama." He nodded, sitting on the bench beside her. "I showed her something about your future. Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart." He smiled. "You're in possibility." She glanced down at the paper in her lap, smudged with charcoal. "I don't want to leave her," she said quietly. Everett nodded. "I'd never ask you to." Leah was quiet a moment. "Then do you think people like Celine were always that way, mean and greedy? Or did something happen to them?" He blinked. "That's a big question. I just wonder if they started small. Like me." He looked at her for a long time. "I think people become who they choose to be. Sometimes pain makes them hard. Sometimes fear makes them cruel. But that means kindness is a choice too." She thought about that. "Then if I ever get really rich, I want to make other people feel seen. The way you saw me." Everett swallowed hard. "You already do, Leah, even without the money." That night, over dinner, Marlene finally spoke. "If you're serious about the offer prep school, mentoring, safety, I'll sign." Everett looked up, but only under one condition. She continued, "I stay close. She doesn't leave my world completely. Of course. And you don't change who she is. Everett met her eyes, steady and sure. I wouldn't dare. Later, alone in her room, Leah stared at her reflection in the big mirror. She didn't look like a poor kid anymore, but she still felt like one. Not in shame, in responsibility. She whispered to herself, "If I ever become important, I won't forget who I was." The ballroom of the Westbridge Civic Center was awash in camera lights. Reporters lined the velvet ropes, some whispering into earpieces, others scribbling into tiny notepads. At the front of the stage, a podium stood between two long banners. Callahan Foundation, Building the Future from the Forgotten Corners. Behind it sat Everett Callahan, dignified in a charcoal suit. To his right, Marlene Monroe, calm but watchful. And just behind the curtain, Delilah Leah Monroe, fiddling nervously with the sleeves of her soft blue sweater. She peeked out. Crowds, cameras, the polished faces of people who had never known what it was like to sleep on a mattress on the floor, to keep change in a jar labeled gas money, or to worry every night if someone might come through the window. She turned slightly as Everett approached. "You don't have to speak," he said gently. "I can handle the whole thing." She bit her lip. "I want to," she whispered. "I just don't know if they'll listen." "They will," he replied, "because your truth is louder than their noise." He handed her a folded note. "You don't have to read it word for word. Just speak like you're telling a story. Your story." She nodded, her heart trembling behind her ribs. The room quieted as Everett stepped up to the podium. He scanned the room, let the silence settle. "I was once the kind of man who believed power could shield me from the world, that as long as I built enough walls, I'd never feel pain." He paused, eyes falling on Leah just beyond the curtain. But a little girl tore through that wall, not with force, not with money, but with courage. There were small murmurs among the audience. Everett stepped aside. "And today, she's going to speak for herself, if you'll listen." He gestured, and Leah stepped out. A moment of pure stillness met her. The cameras clicked softly. Lights burned hot. She reached the podium, barely tall enough to see over it. A small platform had been placed beneath her feet. Everett gave her a quiet nod from the side. Leah unfolded the paper. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice, it didn't crack. "Hi," she began. "My name is Delilah Monroe. I'm 12 years old, and up until a few weeks ago, I didn't know what a foundation was or why rich people liked them so much. But now I think it's just a place where you try to build something bigger than yourself." She looked out at the room. "I didn't save Mr. Callahan because I wanted anything. I didn't even know who he was. I just saw someone hurt, and I thought, what if that were my mom?" A hush spread through the crowd. Leah continued. "After that, people kept asking me how I was so brave, but I don't think I was scared. I was scared when the bad man came to our house. I was scared when I heard my mom cry in the next room, even when she tried to hide it. I was scared when I thought no one would ever care." She looked directly at the sea of faces now. But someone did. Mr. Callahan did, and so did Detective Hale, and Miss Mary, and even Ms. Betty, who still slips me extra peppermint sticks when I visit her shop. The room chuckled gently. And I learned something. You don't have to be rich to matter. You don't have to be big to change something. You just have to try. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crinkled foil candy heart. This is what I gave Mr. Callahan the night I found him. It was all I had, but it was enough. She stepped back from the mic. The room stood, not clapped. Stood, because some truths don't need applause. They need silence to sink in. Later, backstage, Everett hugged her gently. You did more than I ever could, he said, voice thick. Leah wiped a tear from her cheek. So did you. You believed me. Across the room, Marlene watched, her heart fuller than she could ever remember. She didn't just see a child anymore. She saw a change-maker. Ehinor. A week later, construction began on the Monroe Learning Center, a project fully funded by the Callahan Foundation, not a school for the rich, a center for after-school safety, meals, counseling, and hope for kids from places like Camden Heights. At the groundbreaking ceremony, Leah pressed her palm into the wet cement, right next to Everett's. Your name's going to be here forever, he said. Leah grinned. So's yours. What started as a silent act of kindness from a poor little girl ended in a room full of cameras, a microphone in her trembling hands, and a truth so powerful it silenced an entire crowd. Leah Monroe didn't ask to be a hero. She didn't do it for money or headlines. She did it because, in her small but mighty heart, she knew what it felt like to be overlooked, and refused to overlook someone else. She didn't just save a millionaire, she saved his humanity, and in return, he helped her find the strength she never knew she had. But let's not forget, she was almost silenced by people in suits, by systems built to protect power, not people. So here's the question we leave you with. How many more Leahs are out there unseen, unheard, waiting for someone to believe in them? This story is a celebration of resilience, but it's also a warning. Kindness should never be punished, and no one should be judged by their zip code or skin color. Let us know in the comments. What part of Leah's story moved you most? If this story touched your heart, help others hear it too. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge injustice and uplift the human spirit. We'll see you in the next one.